I was at the Starbucks at Sydney International Airport. It was so busy, busy. We used to track at Starbucks the number of cups made per half hour. I will never forget one Boxing Day, which is a very, very busy travel day.
Yep.
We tipped the scales at like 150 cups 1/2 hour.
At some point you decided to leave Starbucks and go into the corporate world. What made you make that decision?
Well, Starbucks closed about 80 of their stores.
That'd be it, yeah.
How I then made that jump into the corporate world is a very, very good friend of mine who worked for the company that I then went to work for. It wasn't a case of, this friend got me the job. This friend pushed me to apply.
Yep. Meet David Willett, a seasoned cybersecurity leader currently heading the Trobe University's IT security team. With over 15 years of experience, he has made his mark at major organisations like Starbucks, Verizon, Dimension Data, PEXA, and the Australian Information Security Association.
When I first came into this industry, it was very much a straight man's world.
Yeah.
I have spent a lot of my career in fear that I will be judged for my sexuality and not my ability to do the job. That has led to me in the very early stages of my career hiding who I am.
Now as the host of Cyber Voices from AISA, David brings together top experts to share insights and diverse perspectives from the ever-evolving world of cybersecurity. So David, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
You're a highly successful CISO. I'm going to start with that. I'm going to start with flattery.
Keep going.
And an accomplished podcaster, which actually does make me a little bit nervous.
Oh, really?
Well, it's we've had a couple of people on the show that run podcasts, and I always think, God, they're much better at this than me. So therefore, you kind of feel like a fraud. The Imposter Syndrome kicks in a bit more, I think.
I think it just means that I know how the game works.
Yeah, maybe. So today, the purpose of this is we're just going to unpack your career. We're going to sort of look at what you've achieved, how you got there, kind of where things started, the barriers you faced, kind of opportunities that came your way and how you grabbed them. So let's start with the journey. And I was doing a bit of background research around you, and I'm pretty sure that you grew up in a place called Warilla. I think I'm saying that right.
Warilla. Okay, so that's very specific.
It's very specific.
Most people say Wollongong, which is roughly close by. But Warilla was the suburb in the city of Shellharbour.
Yes.
Which is,
I have no knowledge. I Googled it, Google image, and it looked beautiful.
It is nice, very, very coastal. It is nothing now like what it was when I grew up, right? Like I can't believe I'm at this age where I can say, it was nothing but rolling farmlands when I lived here, and now it's a big suburban stretch. Lots of people who, unfortunately, priced out of Sydney have built homes there, and it's become a massive city in its own right. But lovely place.
Distance-wise, I guess commute then to Sydney would be what, an hour and a half or so?
Maybe closer to 2.
Oh, okay.
I mean, on the train, I think if you're from Wollongong itself, you could probably get there in about 90 minutes.
Yeah.
But it is, very, very common for people to commute to Sydney from there for work.
Yeah, interesting. I live down the coast, just near Torquay, and do the same thing, which presumably is a similar kind of experience, right? It's a coastal hour and a half or so away from the city.
I think if you don't mind that. Yeah. And a lot of people will make that trade-off, right? And
yes.
We live in a world now where hybrid working seems to be here to stay, so it's probably made it even more attractive a location for people who, I'd say have been priced out of Sydney, but it's getting pretty expensive there. I saw the value of my parents' house recently. Well, and
likewise, I think probably one of the positives that came out of COVID was for the Geelong housing market. The cost of property down there is definitely seen an uptick. As you say, with hybrid working and people being able to do that commute and probably enjoying the lifestyle down there as well.
Yes, I actually think of Geelong as Melbourne's Wollongong.
Yes.
It's very similar, almost the same distance kind of way. So it gives me the same vibe.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I was going to ask you sort of what life was like growing up there, I guess as a kid, but it sounds like you kind of described it was relatively sort of rural, coastal, I'm guessing fairly laid back.
Yeah, you could say that. Like it is New South Wales, South Coast, and it's hard to explain South Coast living unless you've actually been a part of it. Yeah. But laid back is probably a good term for it. It was, I left as soon as I turned 18 because it was a little bit too small for me, if you know what I mean. Like it was probably somewhere where, unless you were going to work in sort of hospitality or you knew someone already in a particular profession, job prospects weren't amazing. Yeah. It started as a steel city. Yeah. Okay. So BHP, Port Kembla Steelworks. Yeah. Which was, brought in big migrant communities and all that kind of stuff. But then, obviously, automation and everything and the industrial age kind of wrapping up meant, the steelworks are still there, but it wasn't a huge employer that it was anymore, right? So I got away to Sydney pretty quickly.
Yeah, and you followed the obvious path of a tech career, right? You worked in, I think, Woolworths for a bit and then went to Starbucks.
Well, that is the launching pad for most CISOs, is making coffee at Starbucks, yeah.
Well, but I was really interested in that part, and there was I'm not sure if I should confess this or not, but I feel like I'd love to work in a Starbucks.
You know what? It was good fun.
Yeah.
It was good fun. I was at the Starbucks at Sydney International Airport. It was so busy, busy. And I always tell people to try and get an idea of how busy it was. We used to track at Starbucks the number of cups made per half hour.
Right, okay. That's an interesting metric.
And I will never forget one Boxing Day, which is a very, very busy travel day.
Yep.
We tipped the scales at like 150 cups 1/2 hour.
Wow. That's insane.
Can you just imagine that? Just sitting like, literally we had like 3 or 4 people on the coffee machine, right? All right. Yeah. Milk, pouring shots, boom, 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 scream out the order. I'll get the muffins. Like it was quite an experience. I think I often think back very, very fondly to those days. It was interesting.
But it's also, look, from what I know about Starbucks and some of these kind of other, let's call them sort of large, like McDonald's and so forth, the management training schemes are supposed to be exceptional.
It was actually pretty good. And I got into management there much quicker than I thought I would. And when we kind of get to the point where I transitioned into tech, I came out of high school. I never went to university.
Yeah.
I think I got through high school and finished high school just to prove that I could.
Yep.
I'm the only member of my family who has.
Yep.
And, I did okay.
Yeah.
I was doing a number of topics which weren't really the kind of topics that got you into a good university course.
Yep.
So I excelled at drama and history and English, terrible at maths, terrible at science. Yep. In fact, tried to avoid doing them if I could. Yep. So that was why I wound up working in retail and hospitality, because I just, again, tried to go straight into the job market in Wollongong. Not that great, and wound up getting full-time role at a Starbucks in Sydney. And before I knew it, within the first year, they're like, all right, we're going to make you a shift supervisor. Now we're going to put you into the management program. And coming back to your point, it's getting accepted into the manager program at Starbucks is a very interesting process.
Yeah.
So the interview for it, if you don't mind me telling the story, there was 2 parts of it, and I'm only just remembering this now because you brought it up. The first part was you actually had to do almost like a quarterly business review of the store that you worked in.
Wow.
So you really had to spend your time and a lot of your own time, because you couldn't really do this while you were on shift. So I would hang back after my shift finished and go through the financial reports and the profit and loss statements and put forward a plan as to how I would make that store more profitable.
Yeah.
And that included everything from staffing through to merchandising. And you would have to have the numbers to back it up. And you'd have to get drilled on it quite heavily. The second part of the experience, which was actually what you did first, was a guided coffee tasting for your interview panel.
Wow.
So you had to take one of the Starbucks blends
Yeah.
and pick, do something unique, right? Understand the blend, where it came from, what its flavor notes were, and pair it with something as well. Don't ask me what I did. I can't. I'm trying desperately now to remember what it was I chose, but I can't remember it. But you had to do that guided coffee tasting experience and demonstrate a knowledge of their coffee, and then do a whole business presentation to them as well.
When you just listening to you describe that, you think in many organizations, let's say a dev team, right? You're looking to promote someone up to be the engineering manager or whatever. They're probably not going through that process, right, of asking the person to do a QBR and pitch the product to the rest of the group. It's pretty intense, and I don't think people would expect that for an organization like Starbucks, that they would kind of go to, and that's what I mean. I think some of the discipline and things I think you learn are probably more valuable than going to university.
Yeah, and it was hard for me. Remember I said I was terrible at maths. So even going into year 11, I went into like a mid-range maths class, and after the first few weeks, the teacher came to me and said, "It looks like you're trying to read another language. I don't want to upset you, but I think we need to move you into what was probably like remedial, right?" So I absolutely agonized over that, right? And I had a partner at the time and was like, am I getting this right? Does this make sense to you? He actually worked in finance, so he was able to kind of help pressure test a little bit. And so much so, I actually went through the experience twice. I got knocked back the first time.
Interesting.
And there was a few things. I think the feedback was my coffee tasting was too over the top. I tried to do too much, and it was meant to be a simple experience. And again, I was a little bit too, I don't want to say too ambitious. I can't quite remember the exact feedback, but there was some things in my business proposal that didn't make a lot of sense. So I had to go back to the drawing board and wait for another opportunity to do that again.
But it's interesting, again, I think that is incredible by Starbucks to push you back, give you that feedback, that you can still remember it, like, I don't know how, 20 years ago, let's say, hypothetically, maybe less, but that you can still remember that it obviously had an impact on you. It made you go back and think through those things. And again, you think about being overly excited about the coffee tasting. Again, it speaks to maybe falling in love with your solution, not the problem. Is a metaphor into kind of business or what we do today, right?
Well, you think about it, right? They're managing the stores. Like, as a manager for one of these cafes, you were essentially running a business, and we were all very young, right? Like, most of us were in our 20s and 30s, and I mean, I was probably 23, 24. Remember, terrible at maths, just scraped through my HSC, and I'm being asked to put forward a business proposal as to how I'm going to up the profit on this particular store, right? So they want to know that, we can trust these people to run a business for us on our behalf.
But they obviously spotted something in you in terms of your potential talent.
You know what? I guess I never thought about it that way at the time. At the time, I was just thinking I've got to prove myself, myself.
Yeah.
When you reflect on it when you're older, the store manager, she put me forward twice. In fact, I can remember she was really upset on my behalf at the feedback. She's like, "What? Your coffee tasting was too over the top." She's like, she used some choice words, which I won't use right now.
But sometimes it's nice to know you've got someone in your corner.
Absolutely.
Especially when you get knocked back, right? As in, whether she was being a bit sort of ruinously empathetic, it doesn't really matter. You need comfort. You need to know that it's not the end of the world. You are going to bounce back, and someone does believe in you.
Exactly. She thought I deserved it. So much so that she made sure that my name got put forward again.
Amazing.
I'm pretty sure she sat down with me the second time. It's like, right, we're going to go through this, right? We're going to get you through this interview.
But it's interesting, isn't it? I think, when we think about our careers, we think about the actions that we take in order to, let's say, propel ourselves forward and progress and so forth. But actually, there's often a supporting cast, like your store manager at Starbucks, that, no doubt that experience right back then would have definitely had a multiplier effect to where you are today in the way that you do things.
Absolutely.
But you don't know at the time. As you say, you're kind of blissfully unaware of the world outside of that.
Well, I think back to it sometimes. I'm like, could I do it again? Like, especially that Sydney airport experience.
Yeah.
It was intense. And we're talking like one of the busiest stores they had in the country.
Yeah.
Because we were right on the departures level,
Yep.
right in the middle of all the check-in gates.
Yeah.
A very recognizable brand to international travelers. And so I was at the age of 23, 24, because I took over management of that store eventually, once I went through the manager program. And, I had a staff of about 20 people, huge turnover, massively busy all the time. I was just like, wow, that was a lot. Was not uncommon to pull a 12, 13, 14-hour day on your feet.
Yes.
Which I could probably do at 23, not so much at 41.
Yeah. It was when I kind of think back on my own career, when I first started becoming a manager and interviewing and hiring people, my boss at the time, I remember him saying to me, always look for those people that have been given responsibility quite young in life or probably beyond their experience, because somebody saw something in them. And if there's multiple instances, doesn't matter if they were made the scout pack leader or the supervisor at Woolworths, or they got put into a management program at Starbucks. If there's these kind of trends, they've got some kind of natural leadership tendency. Yeah. They may not even know what that is or where it's born from. And I think probably some of the best people I've hired over the years have ended up as they got tapped on the shoulder to be the supervisor at KFC or at McDonald's and so forth, or they were the football captain or the netball captain or whatever it could be. It's an interesting trend, and it's something it's still to this day I look for when I'm hiring in people.
Yeah, it's that sink or swim quality, I guess, a little bit. I don't know if that's the right way to put it. Jumping forward a little bit, you've just reminded me of someone I worked with once who I looked up to a lot later on in my career. And I remember I had to act in her role for a while she was away. It was a very important role to this company, and I was beeping myself over what this could be like. And I remember her saying to me, she goes, "Do you know what the reason why I've chosen you to do this, David, is because I know that even though it's a very uncertain situation for you, you won't let yourself sink.
Yeah.
You will get in there and you will figure it out, and you will speak to the right people, and you will, because you want to fail, and you don't want to fail, and that's why it's so important that I give you this opportunity, because you'll grow from it."
And that's a kind of, I think that's actually episode we recorded a couple of days ago. We were talking about leadership, nature versus nurture, and there's probably aspects there that is nature, isn't it, in people, that they've got that tendency, a personality trait where
there is.
You can nurture it. I absolutely believe it's a bit of both, but
there is a natural ability that I think some people have. Yeah. Absolutely. I've developed and mentored young leaders throughout my career as well, and there are just some people who just get it. Yeah. That same person who I was just talking about before, and again, looked up to her massively. I remember her saying to me, "You just get it. You're one of those people who just gets it." And she was speaking in quite broad terms. But I know now what she meant. Yeah. Because there is the person who is now doing my role at my previous employer came in to do a particular job, and there was something I saw in him, or I remember having that same feeling. I'm like, no, he gets it. Yeah. Yeah. No, that's incredibly vague.
And I think, no, absolutely. Look, I think it's a combination of personality traits plus life experience. Yeah. Somewhere that kind of gets that. And I think, again, even just listening to your story where you recognized at 18, my life is going to be probably improved if I leave where I grew up.
Absolutely,
but you took accountability for it. You didn't wait for that to happen to you.
Yes.
And that, again, comes out of certain life experience, but also kind of your personality to do that.
Yeah, of course.
So I think we've gone way off track, but it's always curious. So at some point you decided to leave Starbucks and go into the corporate world. What made you make that decision?
Well, Starbucks closed about 80 of their stores.
That'd be it, yeah.
Overnight, which was a very sudden thing. We were all pulled into a hotel in I was living in Canberra at this point now because my then partner and I had moved to Canberra because he wanted to get a job in the public service. We had some friends down there and I got moved to a store down there. That was 2008, I think. And then, one day we all got pulled into a room at the Hyatt Hotel there in Canberra and we were told this is what's happening.
Yeah.
Next day it was all over the news.
Wow.
And they didn't do as well in Australia as I think they hoped they would. They're still around. They're still here and they're doing quite well now. But
I think it's really growing. They're actually...
Yeah, they are. They are opening new stores.
They're actually opening a store in Geelong at the moment, which to me is a sign that they're clearly
absolutely
starting to land.
But there was a bit of a, they needed to reduce the footprint here in Australia for profitability reasons, whatever it was, right? So anyway, that was why I left.
Got it.
So how I then made that jump into the corporate world is a very, very good friend of mine who worked for the company that I then went to work for. So he invited me over for dinner, right? And him and his partner were like, we think there could be another way for you, right? Because at that point I thought, all right, I haven't been in uni, I barely survived high school, I'm just going to be doing hospitality and retail for the rest of my life. That's what I do.
Yeah.
Which is fine. Like that, lots of people do that as a career choice, and they're going, no. We think there's something else you can do. This is where I work. We've got these roles. It's a network security role. And I'm like, I love computers and tech and all that, but I've never done this before. Like, no. This is super entry level stuff.
Yeah.
We've got some roles coming up. I reckon you should put in an application. So it wasn't a case of, this friend got me the job. This friend pushed me to apply.
Yep.
And so I did. And the role I did it was called a network health monitor.
Was this with Verizon?
This was Verizon.
Yep.
Yeah. So the role basically involved 12-hour shifts, 7 a.m. till 7 p.m. or 7 p.m. till 7 a.m. Sitting in front of 8 big screens, which was a Nagios system, if you've ever heard of that. So Nagios, for anyone that doesn't know it, there's probably a lot of people out there going, oh yeah, Nagios. I think it means like network saint. It's like a Greek word or something. And it basically polls the network, and when there's a problem with a firewall or a router or a switch on the network, you get an alert on Nagios.
Yeah, okay.
My job was to watch the Nagios screens and to log an alert into the ticketing system when it came up and call an engineer and get them to fix it.
Okay.
Sitting in the Bruce data center out there, and then I would, I'd also have to do a bit of physical security and wander around and make sure all the racks were locked and all that kind of stuff.
So that's interesting. So you've gone from 150 cups of coffee every half an hour.
Yeah.
In a very vibrant social environment, interaction, people, noise, hustle, to watching a screen, waiting for something. How did you make that transition?
It was so weird. It was the most, especially having to do like those night shifts and all that kind of stuff. And I just remember this, we talked about imposter syndrome before. This is where I thought I was really out of my depth.
Yep.
Because you're dealing with all this highly technical information, and I'm like, it was, again, remember the maths teacher who told me I looked like I was reading another language? I felt like I was very much in that space again. But what was interesting is something accelerated very, very quickly. Same way it did when I was at Starbucks. So my team leader decided, actually, do you know what? I think you'd be much better on our business hours service desk, dealing directly with customers. It was a little bit more prestige. It was seen as a step up. And then he had to move on within my first year working there. And he sat down with me and he's like, look, I'm actually leaving. And I think you should take my job.
Wow.
Because, look, I've been watching you, you've got this, you understand it, you take the time to learn, the team really like you, I think you're a bit of a natural leader. I'm going to suggest that you apply and put your name down to take on this team leader role.
Yeah, wow.
So within that first year, and I can tell you, that the day I walked into that job, I have never been so terrified in my entire life. I remember someone within my first week, and I was having to log a firewall change request for behalf of a client, and I stuffed something up in my interpretation of it, and it must have been so obvious that the guy training me was just like, "Do you have what's your background? Have you ever worked in this space before?" I'm like, "Is it that obvious?"
Yeah.
And he's like, "Oh, okay, then let me explain this to you," right? And again, I just dove in and learnt it because that's what you had to do.
Was it just literally through immersion? Were you comfortable to put your hand up and say, "I don't know," as in I need guidance?
Yeah, from time to time. The beauty about doing those really long shifts is, okay, so the guys who'd been there for a while would bring in a USB with some movies on it at once things got to a certain time, and would watch movies for the rest of the night. I would sit there and I would go through tickets that were logged in our queue.
Yeah.
And I would find terms I didn't know, things I didn't know and understand, and I kept a little notepad of them.
Yeah.
And then I would go and research them and find out what they were. I mean, this is I didn't even know what DNS was, right? I'm like, DNS, what's that? Write that down, find out what it is.
Yeah, wow.
And then what I would do as well at nighttime is when there was an alert would come up, right? The worst thing you could do was wake one of the engineers up on call for when they didn't really need to be woken up. So I would check what host had been alerting, and then I would find its alert history, because I could look that up in the ticketing system and I could read the notes of what had been done before. And if I found a common theme, I'm like, yep, this seems to parallel to the alert I'm getting now. And initially I would probably call the engineers first and go, hey, I'm getting this alert on such and such host. The history tells me that it's probably this. Usually you restart it, but I think it can wait till morning, but I just wanted to check with you. That's okay. He's like, yeah, no, that one can wait till morning, but thanks for checking, kind of thing, right?
Yeah, okay.
Eventually you get the confidence to go, I don't need to do anything with this one right now. Log it. The day shift can check it out, that kind of thing. But there was a lot of asking questions as well, absolutely. But there was using that shift work to just sit and do my own learning and development was probably what really helped me just get a grasp of what it was that I was doing.
Do you think coming from a non-technical background gave you an advantage in that role?
I think
strangely.
I've been asked this before. I think I had more to prove. I really felt like I had more to prove because I went into that job waiting for everyone to realize that I was an absolute imposter and that I did not belong there.
Yeah.
Which propelled me to make sure that did not happen.
Yeah.
So I guess the term fake it till you make it kind of springs to mind.
Yeah.
And a lot of the time, sometimes I still feel like that's what I'm doing, but a lot of the time it was just like, I don't know this, but it's okay. I can learn it. I remember, I don't know whether I actually told myself that or it was just something I was doing instinctively. It's like, well, I remember, I think I had to tell myself, or someone else told me at some point in those early days, look at where you've come from. It's okay that you don't know this.
Yeah.
But you can learn it.
Yes. Yeah.
If you don't know it, you can learn it, right?
But it's also interesting, my kind of reflection on what you were just talking about is that when a problem came up, you look to solve it from a human perspective or going and looking at the logs. Whereas maybe if you'd kind of grown up tinkering with computers and hacking systems and all this kind of stuff, you'd have just dived straight into the technical solution.
Yeah.
Whereas you've actually taken a step back and looked at it from a different perspective, potentially.
Yeah, I guess you could definitely see it that way. And it's not that I wasn't a technically minded individual in any way. Like, you and I beforehand were just talking about my love of science fiction and Star Trek. And I was always an avid video gamer. I was always playing with computers. I made my own websites. And I did have moments when I was younger when I would find HTML on other websites and then tinker with it to make my own rudimentary websites. So there was base level of understanding, right? I always kind of thought I wanted to do something that was like technology or computer related growing up in the 90s, but I'd never gone into this level of depth. So this was like a whole new world.
Yeah.
But it was funny how you could see how all the different parts work together. Like even just figuring out, all right, source, destination, protocol, or port, I could just go, all right, so that's this device, this one sits in the DMZ, this is one of the external firewalls. I know what that port does. I can get a general, I think this is what they're trying to do. They're trying to open up communications for this application, You just slowly start to piece it all together, right? Okay. I didn't necessarily need to go around and have been a network engineer or been tinkering or hacking computers to be able to just look at what the detail in front of me and research it and figure out what it was, or ask.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I think what's interesting is if I think about maybe it's a very small sample size, but some of the CISOs that we've had on the podcast, they haven't really come from a tech background. I think Sunil's maybe one of the exceptions who was a proper kind of coder. But people like Andrew Morgan and I think Lucas this week and others I've met, they came more from the world of kind of business or maybe consulting. Yeah. And then they've kind of found a curiosity within cyber and security and they've kind of followed into that path. Which has kind of led me thinking increasingly, how much of cyber is, we talk about nature, nurture in leadership, how much is cyber technical stroke human? Mm-hmm. And how effective as a CISO do you need to be, particularly around those human skills?
So I think that's something we're kind of still figuring out. Because remember, when I started at that job at Verizon, I didn't go around telling everyone that I'm working in cyber.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it was a networking company, I guess, with a bit of a security flair, running secure gateways out of their own data center, right? So, that's not quite the right answer to your question. But like, if I think about it, is it nurture or nature? I think those of us who've grown up in the industry, it's a little bit of both.
Yeah,
I think it's the next generation where we're really going to figure that out, right? Because we're throwing so much more effort into training and education in cybersecurity now. But, and maybe this kind of comes to answering your question, what I see is it's great. You can go and do all the book smarts in the world, but it's when you go and do an internship or a grad rotation and you actually get in and start doing it properly, that's when you really sort of start to see whether you've got it or not. I think there's obviously a natural technical skill that some people have, but then there is also just an ability for people to just like piece it together. Actually, great story I can tell on this. So, talking about my last role at PEXA, I know we're not quite up to that point yet, but it speaks to what you were asking about. During the pandemic, we took on an intern through the Victorian government's digital jobs creation program, which was helping people who were displaced by the pandemic or were looking for career change. And we took on a young intern who had done a couple of courses at CyberCX, was a shift supervisor at Starbucks.
There you go.
And had just decided, there was no work, so found this program and dabbled in it, right? And I remember bringing her on, and if she's listening, she definitely knows that I'm talking about her. And it was just meant to be a 3-month internship. And she arrived, and she was pretty green. She was pretty green, and she was so nervous and so scared. And I remember just like going, oh my God, I know exactly what that feels like. And I remember her sitting down with me in her first few weeks and going, oh, David, I don't know if I can do this. I look at what's on the screens with the SOC team and all that, and none of it makes sense to me and all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, did you come here because you already knew it? Or did you come here because you wanted to learn it?
Yeah.
And she's like, oh, I guess I wanted to learn it. And I'm like, okay, so learn it. Yeah. That's what you're here for, right?
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah, and we had her on for those 3 months, and she took that bit of advice and ran with it. And then we made her full-time.
Yeah.
She became our vulnerability manager.
Wow. What a great story.
Yeah, she's still there.
But it's interesting because, look, my reflection as a recruiter is I feel like all we've heard about for the last 4 or 5 years in particular, it's been, the hottest growth area is cybersecurity engineers and cybersecurity. It's the biggest growth on LinkedIn and all this kind of stuff. Where are they? Where are they coming from? And many organizations I speak to are saying, oh, well, we actually moved a BA into that role, or we moved a developer into that role, or someone from this part of the business. So that's interesting, because you would expect that it would be really high technical people that are kind of coming out of university, going into grad programs, but I just don't think that the function has reached that level of maturity. And I kind of liken it to maybe more than a decade ago now, when big data, everyone was talking about big data, and being in the UK and Gartner talking about big data and so on, and this kind of role of data analyst and data scientist and so forth. But it was just actually people changing jobs internally from BAs, and we saw that in insurance companies with actuaries becoming data scientists and so on. And then suddenly you end up with this profession of data analytics, and then people start moving jobs within those roles because they've become more established. And that's kind of my hypothesis for where we are with cyber right now. It's still in a forming mode.
Absolutely. And it's come from a recruitment perspective. It used to be a not what you know, but who you know kind of industry, right? Yep. Like, a CISO would move and then slowly poach over all their mates and the people they trusted. And I mean, you'll see that with CIOs and CTOs and all that kind of stuff as well. These days, I'm seeing people embrace younger, fresh talent, people who are a little bit green, people who don't necessarily come with 5 years experience, but a willingness to learn. Especially because universities now are pumping out some really high quality grads, and it may, as long as you're set up to support them, that's always a key thing. You can't just take a grad on and hope that they're going to be this amazing prodigy. You need to be able to nurture that. So that's maybe speaking to a bit of what you were talking about there, whether it's nature or nurture, a bit of both, right? And more people are coming around to that and wanting to, if they can support them, wanting to bring on those young people, those grads, those interns. And they don't necessarily have to be young people either.
No, that's right.
I took on a grad who was probably like in their 30s or 40s, still young. I'm in my 40s, I consider myself young. But, looking for changes of career. Right? Because it still is a relatively new, fresh industry.
100%. My wife actually has a business called STEM Returners, which is her, and she works with organisations and runs programs to help people with STEM skills and STEM talent who have had a career break, which is normally return to work mums, but very often it will be people that have relocated to Australia with their partner, and no one will give them a job. And she's placing people, I don't know the stats, she can trot them off, but they're all degree, most of them up to PhD. They've got incredible careers and backgrounds. And it's a talent pool where these people are just being ignored. And that's kind of the question I was going to go to. You described, the lady that you I think it was a lady you said who took on there, who's now the vulnerability manager. How does somebody who's got that potential package themselves up? Because, I look at it, again, in my day job, and often say this to people, there's 1.8 million people in Melbourne on LinkedIn. It's very hard to be the kind of signal in the noise, so to speak, as in to be seen.
Yeah, of course.
And to cut through that, and for an employer to go, I can see the potential in that person. Let's bring them on, let's do this. Because potentially the employer doesn't know what potential looks like. Or the role looks like. So therefore, what I'm looking for. And it's a huge opportunity, but it's also a huge challenge at the same time.
And cyber is one of those industries that in recent years has truly understood and started to embrace the power of diversity in its teams and its recruitment strategies. I'm not afraid to say that a lot of my time in the industry has been an industry that has very much been a bit of an old boys club. And these days, there are a lot more people coming into the industry through different avenues where they still... Your question was around, well, how do you package yourself up and stand out a little bit? And there are amazing support groups and member-based associations that have started to crop up, which are really leaning into that need for diversity within the industry. The obvious one that comes to mind is AWSN, Australian Women in Security Network. They do incredible stuff with helping women of all ages get into the industry, providing mentoring opportunities and internships and other programs, so that that they can be seen by recruiters who are maybe starting to become a bit disillusioned with their old boys club.
Yeah, absolutely.
And also as well, there's I've on my own podcast, we've interviewed people who are helping people who are neurodivergent or people living with disability who are perfectly well suited and qualified to be able to work in the industry. However, they don't cope well, or they don't do well in traditional interview recruitment kind of, the stuff that we look for where, our biases all start to click in and all that kind of stuff. So, doing amazing work to help employers and hiring managers. What was the term Rudy used? It become disability confident or disability ready, so that you're ready to support someone in that space, whatever the disability may be. And it's that understanding that, there is plenty of people out there, but you've got to start looking, you've got to become a little bit more diverse in your own thinking around your recruitment strategies. So there's a bit of how do you package yourself up, but then also the people actually doing the hiring have got to start thinking differently as well.
and again, it's really interesting because my wife and I talk about this a lot. And I look at the people that she will put forward through her STEM program, and companies hire them and have incredible outcomes for them. And I just sort of say to her, it's crazy, isn't it? That same organization could engage with us as a recruitment company. If we put that resume forward, they would this would be a no.
Yeah, exactly.
Because it's through the STEM returner program. They've got a different lens or mindset immediately to what they're trying to do with this, and the organisation she does that with everything top to bottom through the CEOs of those businesses are 100% behind it, 100% support it, and it makes a huge difference. And they really, in fact, she was with one organisation in Queensland, Transmax, and they did a really great post last week on LinkedIn about a developer that they'd hired through this program and the outcome of it. And I thought that was just awesome. And it's more that, particularly right now, it's very topical, right? You've got Trump cancelling diversity programs, blaming the Washington plane crash on diversity of hiring. If you saw this as the neurodiverse. And I think, unfortunately, it's going to become an excuse for many companies to
roll back
those programs. But I also think it's potentially an opportunity for companies that now truly actually believe in it.
Double down. Yeah.
So, ironically, I think what Trump's doing could actually have the opposite effect.
And we are seeing companies do that. But I think I've been trying to, and thank you for bringing this up, because it's something that, as a gay man, I'm particularly passionate about. Because, I spent a lot of time, when I first came into this industry, it was very much a straight man's world, to be honest. And I have spent a lot of my career in fear that I will be judged for my sexuality and not my ability to do the job. And that has led to me, in the very early stages of my career, hiding who I am. Diversity, equity, and inclusion programs have given me the comfort to be who I am. Also a little bit of a shield as well, a little bit of, because it means that the company clearly values me as a diverse individual, and I can lean into that a little bit. But for the first time and forever since, I remember when PEXA launched their DEI program when I was there, it was like 2019, 2020, all of a sudden I felt so much more valued. I came to work, I wasn't saying my partner, I was saying my boyfriend, who I'll soon be saying my husband. And that was all. I think that was when my career really started to take off as well, because all of a sudden I wasn't at work with walls up anymore. And I don't think people kind of realize some of that more deeper element of what diversity, equity, and inclusion means. Diversity, equity, and inclusion is, a person in a wheelchair who is perfectly qualified, if not more qualified, to do the job, but needs some special requirements to be able to get to work each day. It is people who are neurodivergent who unfortunately cannot, who don't interview the same way as other people or through traditional interview methods, and therefore require internship programs and what have you, so that people can see what they are capable of.
Yes.
It's not because they are being placed in over the top of others. If that were the case, we would not have such a skills shortage in cybersecurity.
Yeah.
Across the whole world, they're talking about how there is not enough people to fill the jobs in cyber. There's so many vacant roles in Australia, in the US. Leaning into diversity and inclusion programs means that you will find other people who you may not have thought of, who are, like, again, I keep saying, are perfectly qualified for the job, if not more so, through those non-traditional methods. So you've tapped onto something I'm very passionate about.
No, and it's interesting because I did have it in my prep notes that I wanted to cover this with you, but I didn't want to offend you or kind of cover it in the wrong way. So I'm really glad that we've been able to open this up. Mm-hmm. And again, think of what I've learned from this conversation is that in your situation, it enabled you to be authentic at work.
Yes.
By having that program, the endorsement, and you could turn up and you weren't hiding bits of yourself. Yeah. You could turn up and be your true self, which when you're your true self at work, you're going to be the best version. You're going to learn more. Everything's going to be a better outcome. Mm-hmm. It reminded me, one of the guests, I want to say it was Sam McIntyre, who was talking about how in one of her roles, she didn't put up the pictures of her kids on her desk because she didn't want it to be seen as a weakness, that she had children as a woman in the workplace.
So that blows my mind that someone would even think that was a weakness.
Absolutely, but she was talking about the kind of the process, and then also Lisa Dowie, who we sort of spoke about earlier. And I actually posted a clip last week about this because I forgot Lisa had said this, and it gave me goosebumps when I listened back to it. And she was talking about, as a young lady coming into the world of technology, she was given feedback that based on her appearance and her gender, people were going to underestimate her. And to be aware of that. And how she kind of lent into that as her strength. Well, people don't underestimate me, I'm going to blow their socks off.
Yeah.
But what gave me goosebumps is actually I just felt sad. I felt sad that conversation happened. It was good that somebody maybe drew her attention to it, but why should they have to? Like, does that make sense? My mind was just spinning, sort of watching this back.
Yeah, and I empathize with that greatly as well because, I've experienced homophobia in the workplace, and it's really unpleasant as someone who has always just wanted to do a good job. I've done roles where I'm protecting the community, at PEXA, working at Verizon and working within FedGov, and even in my current role, where I'm much more comfortable being me, but to think that someone would just decide that they don't want to work with you, or that you're not capable because you are gay or transgender or a woman. Do you know what I mean? It's mind blowing, and that's what like diversity programs have been about, is breaking through those barriers.
That's right.
And you're absolutely right, because until corporations started embracing DEI, and I try not to use the acronym, right, because I think people are hiding behind the acronym a lot in dismissing it. Until they started embracing it, I started every job with that shield up. Until it would take me months, sometimes years, to feel comfortable letting colleagues in.
Yeah, wow.
Because I would want to suss out what their opinions were like, because I was often working with men, just with straight men, and I would very quickly start to figure out whether I could trust them or not, based on the banter that would go on around the office. And I had moments where I've not been comfortable to kind of divulge that part of myself until I started. But these days, I mean, you could call it age and experience, but these days, I mean, I started my current role at La Trobe University absolutely not caring. Like, you know, what I mean, I chose the right pronouns, used the appropriate pronouns to describe my fiance during the interview process. And you know what, like, and I've come into that job so much more confident, so much more poised, so much more ready, because from day dot, I've just been me.
Yeah.
And because if someone's going to judge me based on that, well, that's their problem. Yeah. But, you know, there is a diversity, equity, and inclusion programs have taught companies and individuals to value that. People have gone and done ally training in companies, not because of some gay agenda.
Yeah.
But because it's just to help you understand something to help you learn.
Look, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's actually I had an experience, and I hadn't really thought about it for many years until this conversation. Early on in recruitment, so this would have been early 2000s, and it was a very male office. Yeah, we had a football team, and we had Sean, who's the star player in the team. Anyway, one evening there was a TV show in the UK where they would bring on sort of sports stars, and the guests would have to kind of guess what they did or what they were famous for and identify them or whatever. Anyway, Sean was on the show as the guest. What was this? And he was part of the men's gay team that won the World Cup soccer team.
Yeah.
But no one knew.
Yeah.
And he hadn't told us that. No one knew anything about this part of his life. And of course, we all came into the office next day and did you see this? Did you see this? But it was just really interesting to say, Sean, why didn't you feel comfortable to tell us, or what did we do? Hopefully we didn't say anything ever that was offensive, banter, or whatever conversations. And it was an education piece and working through that. But it was interesting after that. I felt like Sean was a different person. He was a great person before, but I could see he was more comfortable. Yeah. Anyway, I don't know where I'm going with that story, but it was just an interesting experience of actually how we became aware was in that situation.
And that would have been great for Sean to have been so surprised by his co-workers. You know, as much as things have gotten better for people in different industries, you know, who come from different backgrounds or different minorities, there is areas where things are getting worse, and you know, holding on to these values is a very important way in every industry to make sure that everyone continues to be heard and feels comfortable and can be themselves. And that's really just all it's about, right? It's about creating a level playing field. It's not taking anything away from anyone else. It's just a level playing field, and a safe one at that. And that's what's been really so important about it for me. And you know, as someone who's kind of been through that and experienced homophobia and all kinds of awful things in the workplace because of my sexuality, you know, I've been so vocal as an advocate for it. In my new job, as soon as I saw the opportunity to be on the LGBTQIA plus advisory group of the DEI Council, I was like, and I'm putting myself down on it, because it's important to have that visibility. Because I want anyone coming into cyber or tech to see that, you know, there are leaders who are lesbian, gay, transgender, or bisexual, or whatever it may be, and being successful and accepted and doing well. And so it's really important to me that we hold on to that.
That's the end of part 1. We'll see you again for more this Saturday for part 2. Thank you for listening to Tales from Tech Titans, and be sure to follow us wherever you get your podcast. If you'd like to get more insights about tech careers, then check out the Ember, that's EMMBR, LinkedIn page for the latest updates, articles, and engaging discussions.